Okay, so 7 o'clock as promised. So for those of you who are watching live, hi, welcome, great to see you. For those of you who are watching the recorded version, hey, where were you earlier when I was here? So this evening's topic is the meta programs, Why have I decided to run a Facebook Live on a subject with such an interesting title? First of all, because a number of my current and past students from the world of NLP have asked me if I would do a video on meta programs. Secondly, because it's a fascinating subject, and interestingly enough, I actually run workshops on meta programs and in the corporate world. And the key, I guess, the why learn the meta programs is around getting more awareness of yourself, a better understanding of the how and the why you do things the way in which you do. In the business world, understanding what I'm about to introduce you to will help you greatly in terms of understanding the mindset of people that you are working with, dealing with, selling to, leading, negotiating with, or whatever else it is that you're doing in the business world. Because it really gives you an insight into what makes people tick. It's also an interesting insight into relationships and why some relationships work really well and why some relationships kind of bump heads all the time. So let's get into the meta programs. I guess the easiest way to explain what meta programs are is this. We all have preferences for the way that we do things that we may do completely unconsciously. For example, you fold your arms like this. And if I say to you, fold your arms, you will probably 9 times out of 10 fold them in exactly the same way. Fold your arms, fold your arms. Now, supposing I would say to you, do it the other way. For some, it's very uncomfortable. For some, it's less than comfortable. And for those of us who do it regularly, it becomes easy. And meta programs really is about the way that we choose at an unconscious level to do things on a day-to-day basis. It is, if you like, one of the filters in our mind that helps us to operate in our model of the world, create our model of the world, and interact with other people's models of the world. It's a completely unconscious thing. One of the interesting things about meta programs is that we're all different. We may look alike, we are all different. And even two people who think they are so much the same are not. I've actually met identical twins who have completely different sets of meta programs. Their brains work completely differently. Now, at last count, there were about 60 plus of these meta programs had been identified. And I think that list is probably likely to grow. The key thing to remember is that as I start to explain what these are and how they work, that there's no value judgment on them. Basically, people have preferences to the way they operate. They're not mad or bad or sad or broken. They are just different, sometimes very different to the way that we are. And occasionally you might meet someone and for some reason you just get on almost instantly, you get on so well. And part of that is because some of your language and your behavior, which is being triggered by your values and your meta programs, actually gels with their model of the world. And then you might meet someone else and you immediately think, oh no, I could never get on with this person. I don't know what it is. There's just something about them that I'm not comfortable with. And sometimes that's because their language and their behavior, driven by their meta programs and their values, are so different to yours that there is a manifest gap almost immediately. So this whole thing fascinates me because I've traveled, I've worked with thousands of people from over 40 countries now. And the study is consistent and constant in finding what people do and understanding how and why they do it. And it grew out of the world of NLP, as I mentioned, but long before NLP was around. Some of you will be familiar with the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI. Myers-Briggs was set up as a personality test. What they didn't realize at the time was that they were not actually testing people's personality. They were simply identifying the way that they preferred to operate in the world. And what they had inadvertently, I guess, stumbled on was some of those meta programs. So you may notice some similarities as we start to go into some of these. So my plan this evening is to share some of them with you. To give you some examples, you may want to grab a pencil and a piece of paper, or if you're a mind mapper, to do some mind mapping. I will share about half a dozen or so with you. I will, at the end of this, recommend a really great book if you want to study further. I will always, of course, recommend that you come and learn with me on one of my learning programs, whether it be NLP or the psychology of success, whatever it is. I'm not going to talk any more about that. So some things to bear in mind. One, there is no value judgment on meta programs. They are what they are, we are what we are, and we do not judge people for what they are. The second is that it's very rare to find someone who is an extreme of something. It tends to be that we are all somewhere on a continuum. So we may be more of one and slightly less of the other. You'll understand more as we go into this. And I guess the third thing that I should point out is that many of these are highly contextual. So you may run one type of meta program in your work, your career, your business, and be another type in your attitude to your health and well-being. So let's have a look at some of these, have some fun with them. When we finish, I will post a link for this book that I'm going to recommend. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write in the comments what your questions are. I may not answer those questions right here. I do, however, promise that I will answer your questions as best I can, and I will tag you on the answer so that you know that I've done it. Is that okay? Great, fair enough. So let's get started. The first of these two meta programs run on the basis of global to specific. So we have global thinkers, we have specific thinkers, and we are all somewhere on that continuum. If you're familiar with the MBTI, this really equates to the intuitor and the sensor, So someone who runs a global meta program is more enthused by, has more of a style of big picture thinking, abstract thinking, likes general ideas, likes new ideas, is very much into the global view of things. In the workplace, in the business world, you'll probably find that these people are ideally suited in strategic roles. So your board member, your senior manager, your director, your CEO is likely to be more of a global thinker than a specific thinker. The other end of the scale is the specific thinker. Now, people who are specifics, and in the MBTI world, that would be a sensor, they are more into detail. So let's put this into a business context. If I am a CEO, I'm probably a global thinker. If I'm a good manager, I'm likely to be more of a specific thinker because I've got more detail to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you have someone who is a global thinker and they are forced to be in a specific role, what tends to happen is that they become very bogged down. They start to become frustrated by the amount of detail that they have to work with. And so that can start to create some level of stress in them. Similarly and oppositely, if you have a specific person who is put into a global role, it may be that they then start getting into real micromanagement. I'll give you a prime example. I was once called upon to work with a bank, not in this country, elsewhere, and to work with an HR manager, senior manager, who was in charge of the HR department, excuse me. What was happening there was that this person who'd been put into a senior role, which should be a strategic direction role, was very much a specific thinker. As a consequence, they insisted on being involved in everything. So they wanted to see a copy of every email that came into the department. They had to be copied on every email that went out of the department. They wanted to see a copy of every letter that came in, be involved in every letter that went out. They had to be involved in all the interviewing and all the decision making. The whole process, they were into everything. And what was happening was that the department, the HR section, which comprised of about 120 staff, so this was a pretty fair operation, it's grinding to a halt because people could not get on and do their job without constantly having to refer to this person. So what happened in the end was I was asked to go in and coach this person in order that they could actually carry out the role that they had been assigned. That involved, first of all, making them aware of what was going on, and then on a step-by-step basis, enabling them or helping them to enable themselves to step back and use a delegation and report system, which meant that they did not have to keep sticking their finger into every pie. So that's the first of the meta programs, global to specific, big picture, deep detail. And you know what they say, the devil is in the detail. And we're all on a continuum, one end to the other. Some are more one thing, some are more the other. In the ideal world, it's nice for those of us who are aware of what we are. We can actually work so that we sit in the center and can step into a specific role or step into the strategic thinking as the context, as the situation requires it. Okay, good. So the next one, and you will often hear this one referred to in various different ways, and that is towards and away from motivation. As the great Tony Robbins likes to say, people are either motivated towards the pleasure or away from the pain. And that is somewhat oversimplified and yet not a million miles from the truth. You see, people who are towards motivated are motivated towards the achievement and the getting of things. People who are motivated away from are motivated by things like not getting them. You need to think about that one for a moment. Or are motivated by being averse to consequence and risk. Let me give you a simplified example of that. If we were all sitting in a room together in a hotel somewhere, perhaps at a conference or on a training program, and the fire alarm went off, what would happen is we would all hear the fire alarm and we would all head for the fire exit, I hope. However, in here, we're heading for that fire exit for two different reasons. Some of us are heading for that fire exit because we are heading towards safety. So the unconscious thought is, that way is safety, let's head for that door. Others are motivated by the need to get away from the danger. So they're almost going, where's the fire? Get me out of here. Where's the fire? Get me out of here. So they are driven away from that. And the interesting thing is if we then take this into the world of sport, there are many sports professionals in various disciplines, whether they be athletes, whether they be football, stroke, soccer players, whether they be rugby players, golfers, whatever, who are very towards driven. They want to win. They want to come first. They want to hold that trophy. They want to be on the top step in the podium, on the podium. Why? Because that's what they're working towards. Interestingly enough, in that same race or that same match or that same game, there may be others who are away from motivated, and their energy is directed to crossing the finish line first because they don't want to be second. They do not want to come second. Bear in mind, there's no positive or negative here. It's just the way that we actually function. And there are a number of really famous people out there who are away from driven. If I can give you a personal example, at one time in my life, I was very away from driven, and I didn't realize it until many years later. I used to work for a company called Philips Business Systems, and I remember one year they ran a competition that started in August and ran through to December, and they put up 5 top prizes. Those 5 top prizes were a Philips television set, there was a fridge freezer, there was one of these music centers. You know, in those days you had the record deck, the tape deck, all the recording equipment, everything was there. And it was all in this lovely glass case. There was one of these trolleys for keeping all your food and your plates and everything hot when you're serving a dinner party. And the 5th one, I'm trying to remember the 5th one. 5th one was a washing machine. It was a Philips washing machine. So 5 prizes. And I took all 5 prizes in that competition. I'm very pleased and proud to say. The interesting thing is that when I thought about it, it wasn't actually winning the prizes because I wasn't that interested in the prizes, to be honest. I was interested in winning the prizes because I did not want to be sat at the annual sales conference clapping my hands while some other person went up on the stage and took those prizes. So I was very much driven by the need to not come second. Yeah, I wanted to win for that reason. So you have that towards and away from it, and we're all in there somewhere. We can be very much one end, very much the other, or somewhere on that sliding continuum. And if you think into the world of TV advertising, you may sometimes see advertisements for cars. Doesn't matter what the car is, whether it be a Ford, a Lexus or anything else. And you may see that sometimes they do 2 different advertisements for the same vehicle. One of those advertisements talks about performance, speed, looks, the nice leather upholstery, the heads-up display on the dashboard, the performance, the alloy wheels, and all of this stuff, the pop-up spoiler on the boot, who knows. That is there as a pointer for the people who are motivated towards that, towards the shiny, towards the performance, towards the looks. A couple of days later, you may be watching the TV and another advertisement comes up for the same vehicle. And lo and behold, we're talking now about anti-lock brakes. We're talking about multiple airbags. We're talking about intelligent seat belts. We're talking about 7-year warranty. We're talking about extended periods between servicing. Who do you think that advertisement is aimed at? It's not aimed at Mr. Performance. It's not aimed at the man who wants the sexy car. It's aimed at the person who wants to avoid accidents, who wants to avoid expense. So that's aimed very much at the away from people. So examples of this are all around you. I'm wondering what you are. As you sit there now listening to my voice, ask yourself, what am I? Where do I live? And start to monitor yourself when you go away from here and get a little glimpse of yourself and ask other people. There's a simple question you can ask people to find out, to check their towards or away from, and that is, tell me the kind of things that you like and dislike in your job. And very often they will give you some towards and some away froms. So listen carefully. Listen carefully to what people say. Watch carefully what people do. So that's towards and away from. Are you having enough fun? We'll go on some more. The third one is about our own internal frame of reference. Now, what this is about is very simple. Sometimes we do a job and we just know that we've done a good job. We know in ourselves that we've done a good job. That is an internal frame of reference person. Okay. For example, if I think back to my father, he would do something like, he might be hanging some wallpaper and I would walk over and have a look and say, that's a good job, Dad. And he would say, I know it's a good job, don't need you to tell me. Very much an internal frame of reference. And then there are the people who have an external frame of reference, and they will frequently ask for your opinion. They will ask for your feedback. And that is because in their model of the world, they need some external verification on what they've done or what they're doing. I will remember having people work for me in the past who I would give them a job and they would frequently come to me and say, I've done this bit, Ralph, is this what you were looking for? And then they would come to me later and say, okay, I've done this bit. Can you just tell me, is that okay? Is this okay? Is that okay? And I know that at that time, because I'm going back to 25 years now, I would think to myself, my God, what on earth made me employ this person? Because I can't give them a job to do without them constantly asking questions. The fact is that they had an external need for verification. That's not a bad thing. It's just the way they are. It only becomes challenging if it means that they have to constantly interact with other people to get that verification. And it can be handled. You can actually coach someone who has a strong external need for verification into creating their own internal model with an external confirmation. So that's the internal, external. I sometimes like to joke and say, I'm a guy, when I go out for a suit, I know what I'm looking for. I put a suit on, I look in the mirror, I know that it looks good. I buy it. There are people who will go out, they'll try something on, they will always make sure they take someone with them. They try clothes on and then they look and say, what do you think? Does it look okay? Do I look okay in this? Does my bum look big in this? Those are looking for an external verification, whereas the others, the first example, they have the internal verification. So that's internal and external verification. A true story on this one, I did some modeling work. I don't mean catwalk modeling, I mean behavioral modeling, for a company called Alstom some years ago. And I remember sitting with one of the guys in their contracts department who dealt with maintenance on massive big ticket pieces of equipment. I'm talking about plant and machinery with ticket values in excess of 5-10 million pounds. And we were talking about the success rate of his team, of the maintenance and engineering division. And he was showing me letters of testimonial, letters of thanks from various customers and clients around the world. And I said to him, that's absolutely fantastic. That's brilliant. You must be so pleased with that. And I was stunned when he smiled kind of wryly and said, not really, because in most of these, I think we could have done better. And there's a man with an internal frame of reference who, despite the fact that he's been given great ego-stroking feedback externally, he knows in here that he could have done better because he has a strong internal process. So that's the internal external one. The third one I want to share with you has 3 elements to it. Okay, 3 elements. And it goes like this. There are people in this world who are highly proactive. They will often start things very quickly. If you give them a job to do, they're off like a bullet from a gun to get started. If you give them a project, they're gone. Highly proactive. That is very good in the right circumstances. It can have its challenges because sometimes highly proactive people will act a little too quickly without thinking, and sometimes that can have consequences. I know, I've been there, I've done it myself in the past. You get an idea, you act on it, you don't think it through, and then later on someone says, should have talked to me about that because that might be a problem. So you've got highly proactive people. You've then got reactive people, and reactive people are the people who will generally step back, wait and see before they do something. They will see what the consensus is, or they'll see what others are doing, or they will think and reflect or discuss before they actually act. If you look at the world of technology, Apple are a very proactive company, a very proactive brand. They have come up with so much innovation over the years. So they are proactive. They drive that innovation. Then you look at organizations like Samsung, who look at the market, see what the market wants, and then produce to fill that market. So you've got proactive and you've got reactive. The third one, and this is the one that is sometimes a real challenge, and that's people who are inactive. In other words, they are quite happy to sit back and watch and listen, and they don't generally take any action until they have to. And that in itself can be useful sometimes. More often than not, though, it can create a challenge, especially in a team environment where you get someone who's highly inactive and they want to hover around the edge. They want to watch what's going on. They want to listen to what's going on. They're picking up lots of learning from it. They're there if someone calls upon them, but they will never step forward and say, okay, I can do that, or I can take care of this. And if someone says to them, okay, can you do this? They might say, well, there might be someone else better to do that job. So those are the inactive people. In the world of training, I frequently see this because I might set an exercise and there may be a group of 5 people. The proactive person will say, okay, what we need now is we need some pens, we need some paper, we need some post-it notes. David, can you get the paper and the pens? Julie, do you think you could get the post-it notes for us? That's great. Cool. So what I think we should do is this, and they will proactively step into that role. Reactive people will often not step into a group straight away. They will watch and see which groups are forming, and then they will step into a group. They're not proactive in forming that group. They are reactive and they will step into the group. They will happily act as part of the group and go along with the group. They won't necessarily drive it. The thing is that reactive people often will think and reflect a little bit, and sometimes they will spot and avoid the problem before it becomes a nightmare. So they are not negative. There's no right or wrong, good or bad here. Both of these people are highly valuable in many contexts. So that's your proactive, reactive, inactive. Let's look into the world of business, particularly in team development. I have one to share with you, which I have always found very interesting and very useful. And that is, again, it's a 3-tier one. And bear in mind that we all have these in us. It's just that one of them tends to be the top layer on the cake. So it's where we would generally prefer to operate. Some people operate very well as team players. They will happily be involved in a team. They will happily do things as a member of the group. They will happily collaborate and work together. They are very comfortable doing that. They are what we call the team player, okay? The team player. Then there are those who are less comfortable doing that. Incidentally, the team player is often slightly more extrovert than others because they are socially aware and want to be in that group. The second one is what I tend to call the lone wolf. In other words, the lone player. Now, the lone player will operate as part of a team, and often at the first opportunity, they will take themselves out to do something themselves. So if there are some tasks to be handed out, they will grab one that they can do on their own because they're comfortable working by themselves. They are more inclined to work alone. In a sales environment, very often you'll find that a lot of good salespeople are lone players because in a lot of field sales roles, if I think back to my days, at one time I covered probably about a quarter of the country of England, and I very rarely saw anybody else from the company. So I was very much a lone player in those days. So that worked for me because I was happy like that. I functioned like that. So you've got lone players, you've got team players. Then you've got what are often referred to as management players. And these are the people who in a team environment will automatically step up and choose to be running things. So they will be very much in the kind of control and influence bracket. They are looking to make things happen, to get things done, to get other people doing things. So they will happily drive it. Now, again, there's no right or wrong in any of these, but in the corporate world, in the business world, where you want to put the right peg into the right hole, it's useful to be able to understand people's psyche, people's preferences, in order to put them into the right job and avoid a situation where they might find themselves under stress. Okay. Couple more for you to think about before I disappear and leave you with some thoughts. Some people are motivated entirely by attention to themselves. This is not a selfish person. It is a person who, through no fault of their own, through the way that they are programmed or have been programmed in their life, their initial attention is to themselves. At the opposite end of the scale, you'll find that there are those whose level of attention is on others. Now, you won't hear this in their language, you will see it in their behavior. One of the little tricks that I sometimes pull in a room where there's a group of people is I might say, it's cold in here, is anybody cold? People who are self-aware, who are self-driven, will sometimes pull their jacket a little tighter around themselves, while someone else might turn to others and say, are you cold? Do you want me to turn the heating up? So the first person, their first thought is my comfort. The other person, their first thought is the comfort of others. Okay? Self and others. Again, in a team environment, sometimes you want to be thinking about people who are more oriented to others. In the ideal world, this is one where you want to have a balance, because if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of others. And if you are constantly taking care of yourself, you're not going to bother taking care of others. So the ideal situation would be to be somewhere center of that continuum. And you get that by deliberately examining your focus and practicing swinging between the two. Okay. I've got one more to share with you, then I will love you and leave you. And that is Mr. Options and Mr. Procedure, or Miss Options and Miss Procedure. Some people have a preference for process and procedure. They like to do things the way they should be done. I remember working in a company where if you went to the photocopier, there was a sheet of paper above the photocopier with the procedure that you needed to follow if you wanted to use it. Step by step, you had to follow this procedure. If anybody caught you not following procedure, you would be banned from using the photocopier. That procedure was great for people who like procedures. At the other end of the scale is what I call the free spirit, the options person who is looking for other ways to do things. I have always been very much an options person. If you attempt to straitjacket me with a procedure or a set of rules, my brain is automatically looking for ways to get around those and find another, perhaps better way of doing things. It's just the way I am, and I'm quite happy with that. But I have worked with people in the past who thought I was the spawn of the devil simply because they had all the paperwork and they wanted me to fill in all this paperwork. And I would say, why do I need to fill in 3 pieces of paper when I can fill in one, photocopy it, and give each of you a piece of paper? But you know, the red form has to go to this department, and the yellow form must go to that department, and the green form has to go upstairs. And remember, please, you must sign it in blood, and the blood must be taken from your left hand on the 3rd Friday of every month, because that's the way it's always been. So there is procedure, and there are times when a procedure is important. There are times when a procedure will save your life. There are times when a procedure will get business done. There are times when you need options, because if you keep banging against a procedure that isn't working and you don't look for alternatives, you are going to be screwed. Things will not happen. Now, let me give you a little tip. If you want a procedure written, the best person to write the procedure is an options person, because they will look at all the ideas for writing the procedure. Don't ask them to follow it, just ask them to write it. And once they've done it, the procedures people will happily follow it to the ends of the earth. So what I've shared with you here this evening are just a few examples of the meta programs themselves, what I call the personal style filters of how we like to operate in the world. As I've said, there are 64 of them at the last count. They are a key element of what we refer to as behavioral modeling. If you've got a top sales team who are performing outstandingly well, and you find that in that team you've got 3, maybe 4 people who are the business and the rest are kind of okay, people like me can study those 3 or 4, find out what makes them tick, and then we can train the other 3 or 4 to do it the way those top stars do it. So we can reproduce excellence. That's called behavioral modeling. It's a key element in any NLP master practitioner program. So if you are an NLP master practitioner, you should, in my model of the world, understand 2 key things: the meta programs and how to identify them, and you should be understanding advanced behavioral modeling. If you don't, then you probably need to come and talk to me. And finally, before I bid you farewell, the book that I promised I would share with you is called Words That Change Minds. That's Words That Change Minds. It's by a lady called Shelley Rose Charvet. I will spell it for you. Shelley, Shelley. Shelley. Rose, R-O-S-E. Charvet, C-H-A-R-V-E-T. C-H-A-R-V-E-T. I believe she's French-Canadian. She wrote an amazing book. It's called Words That Change Minds. I can strongly recommend it. You can buy it on Amazon, either as a paperback at around £18-20. You can download it for your Kindle at considerably less and watch it on one of your electronic devices. I hope that this evening's session has proved useful to all of you. Certainly, I know that there are some of you who will find it fascinating because you are on your journey of neuro-linguistic programming at a fairly advanced stage. So I'll leave you with those. Please feel free to punch your questions in the comments box below, and I will, in the fullness of time, respond to all questions wherever possible. And I will love you and leave you with that. See you again soon. In the meantime, as always, bye for now.